Hi, my name is Jennifer Dotson, and I'm your host for Poetry Today. I'm also the founder and creative engineer for Highland Park Poetry, and I'm really excited to have with me Phillip J. Cozzi, MD. He was a pulmonary critical care and sleep medicine physician who has been medical director of critical care at Elmhurst Hospital for the last 25 years. He attended University of Chicago Medical School, completed residency at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, and then pulmonary and critical care fellowships at the University of Chicago. He has over 50 poems published in journals and was awarded the inaugural Poetry Prize from the American College of Physicians. Dr. Cozzi also has received the 2019 Morton Marr Poetry Prize from the Southwest Review. He completed his Master of Fine Arts from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago in 2022. His first book of poetry, A Stranger's Heart, received first place in the Gold Wake Autumn Manuscript Competition and was also released in 2022. Dr. Cozzi lives in the western suburbs of Chicago with his wife, and they have 4 children. Please welcome Dr. Cozzi.
Thank
Phil.
you, Jennifer. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, well, it's a real pleasure and an honor to have you here as well.
Thank you.
And we're real excited about your book and the fact that you're going to be reading as a feature tomorrow for us at our monthly event, February 10th. I don't even know what day it is, at 4 o'clock. So that's going to be great. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
But this is a sneak preview for anybody who wants to see you read in advance or after if they miss the event. So
Thanks.
But tell me about, I mean, it's not very often. I mean, I've heard, as I recall, wasn't William Carlos Williams a physician
Of course,
as well?
yes.
Okay. But I haven't, other than that, I don't know of many doctors, and certainly no doctors with, being the medical director of critical care for Elmhurst Hospital for 25 years. When do you write poetry? I guess that's the big question.
Thank you. Anton Chekhov is a,
Oh, okay.
is a
All right.
physician poet as well. Thanks again for having me. And when do I find time for
Yes.
this? I have to seclude myself in library and write and do it in a disciplined way. I have really just done that throughout my whole life. Physicians and poetry are a growing clan. When I started writing medical poetry in the mid-'80s, now dating myself, it was a small group, although many of the medical journals have picked up on the enthusiasm for poetry and have started featuring poetry in essentially every issue. For example,
wow.
the Annals of Internal Medicine has published 17 of my poems, and they will publish poems in almost every issue. The New England Journal of Medicine used to include poetry. Now they include only photography from physicians.
Okay.
The Journal of the American Medical Association has a byline which also features poetry, and so many of them do. And the enthusiasm within medical curricula are picking up humanities, and so that it's not uncommon to see medical students and young physicians writing as part of their experience, and the blending of these two disciplines is really ripe for writing.
Well, I think that's got to be a good sign for both for poetry and for physicians because, well, actually, before I did this, I used to work as the executive assistant to the chair of internal medicine at Advocate in Illinois Masonic a long time ago. And he read a few of my poems, but he never suggested that I
Nice.
should submit them to any medical journals.
Were they medically themed?
No. So they weren't medically themed. But yes, Dr. John Shagrin was my boss. So.
Wonderful.
Anyway, but I think I think medical students generally, you're so focused on trying to absorb so much information that wouldn't it be a good idea to help your bedside manner if you also do something?
Absolutely, the more well-rounded you are. And I would say that the American College of Graduate Medical Education enthusiasm for bringing in medical students who have various backgrounds and who have different interests and bring something different to the table is really part of their agenda as well. They want to see a variety of interests as opposed to really strict, focused scientific background.
Okay. Well, I think before we get into our more conversation, I would love to hear an example of a poem from your book, if that's
yes,
okay.
Thank you. Now, if you want to, people always think of me as a physician poet, so I'm always inclined to read a medical poem first. And then, as I had suggested to you previously, I have to read something more lighthearted because sometimes the seriousness can just really keep you down. So I'm going to read a poem entitled First Clinic Visit with Mr. Schrammel, and this, I might say, is my favorite poem of mine of all time because it was the first published in a medical journal.
Okay.
And this was published in the New England Journal of Medicine and describes an experience. I wrote this as a medical student. I was a third-year medical student, and I loved this guy. He was wonderful. He passed, and I wept like a baby. And my senior resident was holding me saying, "Phil, you didn't do anything wrong." But it was my first patient that had passed. It was really an emotional experience. First clinic visit with Mr. Schrammel. The last time I saw him, encephalopath, addict to ethanol, his soft accent had been replaced by a dirge of ventilator valves, opening and closing in chorus. His hair was a greasy mat, and his sheepish, guilty, half-hidden grin had fallen open, a mouth incapable of subtlety. Even the sweet stink of his breath was gone. But the first time I saw Mr. Schrammel, when sunlight poured through the clinic like a draft of beer and shone on that likable grin and the hair he claimed to comb with Danish butter straight back, when his breath spoke more of perfume than poison, I thought I am so lucky to be in medicine. So that was my first.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, a first in many ways, right? It was the first time you said it was published in a medical journal. And of course, the poem is describing the first patient that passed. So that's, wow. Yeah. Oh, boy.
At tomorrow's reading, I intend to string a sequence of them together, suggesting that I'm going to bring the audience on rounds with me.
Oh, that's very
clever. And here are going to be the first 4 or 5 patients I'll be introducing them to. And so.
Wow. Well, very descriptive. It does. You do see. You give us a lot to see with that poem, both the before and the after. Although you do it in reverse chronology. That's, And I love that description of the sunlight, like a beer.
Draft of beer.
Yes, that was nice. So you're saying most of the poems in this are medically related? Is
Well,
that really where you get most of your inspiration? I mean, I guess it is.
the poem is the book is divided in 6 sections.
Okay.
Many of the poems are medically informed, but one section, the larger section, is entirely medical poems.
Okay.
And then many of the other poems in other sections, and each section has a theme.
Okay.
The first section is a miscellany of more serious poems on life in general. The second section is a collection of more lighthearted poems.
Okay.
The third section is more personal, really regarding my parents and upbringing. The fourth section is entirely medical. The fifth section is more about extended family. And the sixth section is entirely on plants and animals.
Okay.
I had taken a wonderful class entitled Literary Animal, taught by a wonderful poet by the name of Mary Cross at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago.
Okay.
And these poems were written largely as a member of her class.
Oh, neat. All right.
So, well, that last section.
Okay. Now that you have this book published, where do you get most of your ideas for poems?
You know, anything that strikes me as funny or different or unusual, or I may take an inspiration from a patient experience, or I may just go to the library with absolutely nothing to write, and then I just start writing until it somewhat forms itself on the page. I'm not sure how you've done it, but my avocation and vocation have become one, really. They're starting to blend. I may be sitting, one of the poems in this particular book, called Paper Mache Sphinx, it's too serious to read in this venue that I'll spare you, but I was writing one poem, and then I was called to the library, or called to the emergency room to see a patient, and I finished the second half of the poem, including that individual. And I think they actually blended really well and worked to a good poem. And a nice turn in the poem that was really happenstance.
Yeah.
So I'm able to work them together.
Do you have to, I mean, given HIPAA, do you have to get a waiver?
No, all of the names have been changed.
Okay.
I have, although some of the journals have told me they don't really care.
Oh, okay.
And I have included, there's one poem in this book called Dr. Thomas and Dr. Woods, and it's really a nice elegy to these gentlemen.
Okay.
And
so
it reflects very favorably upon my mentors, my undergraduate mentors, great researchers in avian endocrinology. And
avian?
Avian, birds.
I was going to say, avian, that doesn't sound like human.
No, we used an egg model in which we would drill a hole into the egg with a dentist drill and expose the glands of these birds and manipulate them by doing hypophysectomy. So if you remove the rudimentary pituitary tissue to study the pituitary adrenal axis, you can gain insights into physiology.
Okay.
And so these guys were researchers. I read the poem to Dr. Thomas, and even though it reflected upon him extremely well, his comment was, "It makes me sound like I'm dead." And so you never know how people will receive these poems.
Yeah. Yeah, you thought it was a poem of praise.
Yes.
And he was like, well, yeah, okay, I gotcha.
In fact, I'll read it just for fun. I haven't read this one in a long time, but let me see if I can find it.
That's great.
And it'll be another part of my eternal appreciation for these mentors, Dr. Thomas and Dr. Woods. These men of biology are gone. No more racing to the hatchery on day 13 and a half of incubation. They knitted experiments with test tubes, drilled windows in chicken eggs with a dentist drill, dissected and transplanted each other's thoughts, wrote and rewrote, typed and stapled their studies. They harvested, fixed, embedded with wax, sections stained and studied the glands of unborn birds. I remember how they kicked me out of their lab, then took me back. They made me laugh with frequent irrelevant references to the papal monkeys. Now, at the end of the day, after my last patient has left, I turn off the lights in the clinic. In that moment in the dark, they are with me. Lab coats stained, hands raw from washing glassware, and the soft smoke of chicken shell fills my nostrils.
Wow.
I was fond of these guys, but I got them after they retired, so I said
okay.
they're gone. They actually moved to Florida. I visited them in
That's
Florida and read the poem to them. What are you going to do?
Yeah. Well, tell me also about the journey of your book as well.
Thank you. So maybe 3 years ago, I attended the AWP, which is the American Writers National Meeting and Association, and I did this at the encouragement of my grad student advisors. They say, go to the meeting, get involved, learn. They encouraged me to actually participate and host an event. And I went to a meeting entitled How to Publish a Book. And I showed up late to the meeting. Oh, no. So I showed up late, and it was a huge auditorium filled to the brim with people, young people, older people, every sort of person you could find. There was one seat left in the front row, directly in front of a panel, a very distinguished panel. Kim Adanzio, David Kirby, and others. And David Kirby, well, firstly, they asked the audience, how many of you have a manuscript to publish? And at this time, I was a first-year grad student. I didn't have a manuscript. And I just glanced over my shoulder, and I saw an entire sea. Everybody in the auditorium was like this.
Oh my God.
Every single one of them. I looked over my shoulder and my jaw dropped in horror. And David Kirby went on to say, if you want to get your book published, you're going to have to win a national competition. Mm-hmm. And everybody's heart sank, including my own. And but I chipped away and kept working and submitting poems for publication, and was very, very fortunate to get some acceptances. And I was able to collect many of the poems that had been published and pull them together to have a manuscript. And it was a large manuscript. It was 150 pages long. And so I worked at it with my grad advisors, and they helped me chip it down, and they were very generous of spirit in offering a wonderful critique. So I had individuals from the very beginning helping me with my manuscript as I was in the midst of my MFA program, and this manuscript was really the capstone project for my MFA, which was 2-year full-time program, but I did it half-time over 4 years. So I was able to put all my classes in on one day of the week and take summer school.
Okay. Getting
into grad school, I can share that experience after I finish this anecdote. but I had the manuscript, and then I pulled it together and created a book. And the last class I took at the Art Institute of Chicago was called The Art of Bookmaking. And I was able to learn about the InDesign program and put the poems in the InDesign. And my teacher at that time kept saying, "Phil, you don't have to do all this for this class." And I said, I want to do it. I had a tremendous advantage over all the other students at the Art Institute, and that was, I'm a physician, I was a medical student, I was extremely disciplined, and although they are phenomenally creative, it's not the most disciplined bunch.
Yeah.
And so I was driven to pull together a manuscript. And so I pulled it together and then put it in sections. Creating a book is different from writing a poem. You have to spread out all the poems on the floor and see where they fall, put them together in different groupings. So this 6-sectioned book was originally 3 sections, and I ended up breaking them up. And when you create the book, you put images into the book for sections. And so I was able to put, pick out some of my favorite images from radiography. And so the book has, pictures of chest x-rays and pelvic x-rays and hand x-rays, and so made it interesting and a little different.
Yeah.
And then I got the Poets Market, and I studied the options for contests, and there really were 5 contests that were available to me to submit. And I submitted to them, and got a phone call from Iowa, and as I had mentioned to you previously, I thought it was spam or a telemarketer, so I let it go because I thought it was a garbage call. And but most garbage calls, they won't leave messages, but this one left a message, and they said, and the message was, "Hi Phil, I'm Kyle McCord from Goldwake Press. If you could please give me a call, I'd be appreciative." So I had thought, wow, they're going to call to let me down. And then he called and told me that I had won that award. So I was extremely lucky, and there were over 450 manuscripts submitted, and there was a panel of 4, and he told me they unanimously picked it. So I was extremely lucky in doing this. But really, I was also blessed to have the skill of my teachers providing me discerning textual comment all along the way in reviewing, and then also some guidance on how to pull together a manuscript. So it was extremely helpful for me.
Excellent. I would like to hear, you said you do have a more lighthearted poem.
Yes.
I would like to hear that lighthearted poem.
I would be happy to.
And then we'll have to say goodbye.
Uh-oh. So this poem is entitled "The Many Uses of Poetry." Dear Matthew, I knew you wouldn't mind if I used your latest volume to keep my billiard table level. This way, all the balls don't rush toward one pocket. And since I'm striving to strangify, I have also used it as an oven mitt, headrest, and even stand on it to try to make myself taller, confounded by the need to simultaneously wear the book atop my head as a level to mark my growth as a writer on the door jamb. And since the spirit of the book has already entered me like a big bowl of buttered noodles, each scrumptious syllable intercalating my deoxynucleics, why not make a paper airplane of the table of contents? A pirate hat of page 91. I tore out your bio, scrolled it into a telescope, startled my wife with a gravelly ahoy, scanned the horizon for booty, a bucket of defining characteristics, and the high dive of our youth, baking parchment. You rescued my family when I couldn't light wet logs on our soggy Kettle Moraine camping trip. What wonderful kindling you make. And since I have done none of these things, and all of these things, and owe you so much, I invite you over to meet my family, the one you saved, Darlene, Phillip, Joseph, even Pickles the cat. We will serve casserole on your book Become Trivet. Then you and I will head to the basement for the ceremonial commiseration of failures over a quick game of pool. Thank you.
Oh, that is very, very nice.
Thank you.
And good, a good lighthearted. You're right. It is a nice lighthearted poem if you're after you've had a bunch of
Serious poems.
serious poems. Well, I'm sure the audience tomorrow will be very happy to hear the journey, to go on rounds, and then have a little lighthearted wrap up. You were going to tell me though briefly about the how you got into graduate school.
Oh, so I was walking through the Art Institute with my wife, and I had no idea that they had a school of the entitled the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and she said, "Phil, you have to do this." And I walked up to the graduate student office and introduced myself and met with one of their staff, and they talked to me for a little bit, and then I went home and nothing happened. And then a year later, I got a business card, come to an open house for prospective students. So I attended that, and Sally Fado, the then chair of the Department of Writing for the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, used the same words that my wife used, said, "You should do this." So I applied, and believe it or not, I had to get my high school transcript, and I had to then apply. And they get over 250 applications, and they interview about 50 people, and they take 10.
Wow.
And so I showed up wearing a suit and a tie, and I was in a cafeteria type room with the 49 other students who were all in their mid-20s.
Oh, wow.
And all presuming that I was one of the
nice.
professors at the school, and eyeing me suspiciously. And so I interviewed. It turned out to be a great experience for me. Really intellectually vibrant community. I would encourage any person who's interested in writing to do it.
Oh, wonderful. Well, Phil, this has been great getting to know you and about your journey in poetry and the journey of your book. And really looking forward to tomorrow to hearing you read a full set, I guess, for the reader, the listeners at our open mic event. So thank you very much for being my guest this Poetry Today, and thank you for tuning in.